Welcome to Powered by Rainbows, an LGBTQ education network made possible by viewers like you. Every season and year, our show celebrates Pride Month in June, with rainbows everywhere, and tons of exciting episodes. Throughout the year, we have tons of laughs making this show, and we have the honor of sharing valuable lessons to schools and to students around the world. If you don't know the history of this month, the LGBTQ Pride Celebration Month was started in 1970 to commemorate the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Riots on June 27, 1969. 1 year later, they started the Gay Liberation Day celebration, which has now grown into the entire month of June, officially being recognized as Pride Month for LGBTQ people everywhere. We even have 261 holidays year-round, recognizing LGBTQ people and the importance in society nowadays. But every year since 2016, our community takes one day inside of our celebratory month to pause our celebrations worldwide. And tonight, for the fourth time in our show's history, I ask you to join me as we pause our celebrations here at Powered by Rainbows. Tonight, we honor the lives of all those we lost in our fight for equality, for basic human rights, for the decency of living freely as straight and cisgender people are able to do without question. Tonight, we honor the lives of all those beautiful souls taken from this earth too soon. The lesbians who were beaten savagely on the street for simply holding hands. The gay men who were tied to a fence post in the middle of the desert and left to die because they asked a straight man out on a date. The bisexuals who were shot dead in the street because they didn't pick a side. The transgender individuals who were stabbed countless times because they simply wanted to use the appropriate bathroom. The queer kids who were pushed to suicide because bullies are relentless. The non-binary NBs who were killed just because their gender didn't align with the gender stereotypes the older generations forced onto us. The intersex individuals who were beaten, and the asexuals who were pushed to suicide because society kept forcing them to feel less than. The LGBTQ people taken from this life from HIV, AIDS, and related causes because doctors back in the day honestly thought death was a worthy punishment for being LGBTQ. Tonight, most importantly, we honor the lives of the 49 innocent souls lost on June 12, 2016, at the Pulse Nightclub in Orlando, Florida. This evening, we will pause our celebration of Pride for exactly 49 minutes, and hope that you join us for this evening's full broadcast. You will hear the story of what happened this night in 2016. You will hear the stories from the victims themselves, but you will also hear the chilling details of how hate crimes against LGBTQ people continue to this day. We don't share these details to frighten you, but instead to remind you of what we are fighting for when fighting for equality in our legislation, in our workplaces, schools, and in our neighborhoods. We share these details to honor the victims of these crimes who were taken from this life too early simply because of whom they love or what gender they are. This evening's broadcast is a collaboration vigil brought to you by Powered by Rainbows, the Pennsylvania Equality Project, and the Florida Social Justice Project. These three organizations and our efforts are for the empowerment and education for the LGBTQ community. We fight every day for our basic human rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But more importantly, we fight to end tragic events like the one which occurred just a few years ago on this very night in 2016. On the evening of June 12, 2016, the Pulse Nightclub in Orlando, Florida, was getting ready for another thriving night at their gay nightclub. They were hosting a Latin night promotion event, so most of the patrons that night were Hispanic. The Latin night event was running smoothly and was nearing final call. But that night would be the Pulse Nightclub's final night in business, and the events which occurred there would shake not only the city of Orlando, but the whole world to its core. Around 2:05 a.m. Eastern Time, a 29-year-old man who will remain nameless in our broadcast here tonight entered the Pulse Nightclub, which had around 300 LGBTQ people already inside. He was carrying with him an AR-15 style assault rifle and a handgun. He exchanged fire with the Pulse Nightclub's police officer at the entranceway before gunning his way inside. At 2:09 a.m. Eastern Time, the Pulse Nightclub posted to its Facebook page, quote, "Everyone, get out of Pulse and keep running." An emergency call made from inside the club shortly after the shooting began later revealed through its recording that the gunman was shooting while pledging allegiance to the leader of the Islamic State. With several LGBTQ patrons already murdered, additional officers arrived at the scene, and a secondary shooting spree began. It was now just 13 minutes into the terroristic attack, but it was later revealed that by 2:18 a.m. Eastern Time, the gunman was held up in the restrooms of the nightclub, and he took hostages into those restrooms with him. As the police forced him back further into the building and into the restrooms, police further back in line were beginning to rescue people in the main nightclub space. It was later revealed by the police rescuers in the building at the time that there were so many people lying on the dance floor that they began demanding, quote, "If you're alive, raise your hand." By 2:35 a.m., the gunman told the police he had explosives in the building in order to keep them at distance. At 5 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 grueling hours into the mass shooting, the police chiefs made the ultimate decision to breach the back wall of the nightclub with explosives and storm the building with force. It was through these large holes created by the police explosives through which dozens of other people still inside the nightclub were able to escape. While the police were storming the building, and while innocent people were running for their lives, the gunman emerged. The police immediately neutralized the threat, saving dozens of additional lives. It was the deadliest incident of violence against the LGBTQ people in United States history. Before the Pulse nightclub incident, the deadliest act of violence against LGBTQ people in the United States was the upstairs lounge arson attack, which occurred on June 24, 1973. That event took place in New Orleans, Louisiana, on the final night of Pride weekend in the city. The official cause is still listed as undetermined origin, but the 3-story building was set on fire, and the culprit is believed to have been a man who was ejected from the bar a night earlier and who took his own life in November of 1974. The arson attack resulted in the death of 32 LGBTQ people, but sadly the Pulse nightclub shooting more than surpassed its record. Pulse was the deadliest terroristic attack in the United States since September 11, 2001. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting by a single gunman in the United States until 1 year later when a gunman opened fire on an audience of country music fans in Las Vegas, Nevada. In the following weeks and months following the Pulse nightclub shooting, the world came together to help the victims, the families, and the LGBTQ community as a whole. Hundreds of people lined up to donate blood. The 2 hospitals who treated the wounded announced in late August that they will not be billing the survivors or seeking reimbursement. The city of Orlando offered free plots and funeral services at the city-owned cemetery for those murdered. Equality Florida, which is the largest LGBTQ rights group in the state, started a GoFundMe, raising over $750,000 in the first 9 hours, and $7.85 million in the first 3 months. The mayor of Orlando at the time, Mr. Buddy Dyer, started another fundraising campaign called One Orlando, which raised over $23 million, thanks in part to $1 million donations each coming from the nearby Walt Disney Company and Universal Orlando Resort, owned by NBC Universal. For those in our country who seem to think marriage equality is enough for the LGBTQ community, and we should be happy with what we got, allow me to remind you that marriage equality passed the U.S. Supreme Court on June 26, 2015, almost a full year prior to this mass shooting in Orlando. And for those who need a chilling reminder of why we desperately need anti-discrimination laws, LGBTQ education in all schools mandatory, bans on conversion therapy, and reforms to our hate crime laws. And for those who seem to think we can take a back seat and wait for homophobia and transphobic beliefs to slowly evaporate as older generations pass on, let me remind you that a total of 603 calls to the 911 center were received that night from inside the nightclub. I would not recommend to my worst enemy you read the transcripts, listen to the recordings of those calls, watch body cam footage, nor do I recommend you read the 71-page detailed report by the Orlando Police Department, released over a month later. But if you need a reminder of why we need LGBTQ protections in our laws and by our government, not to mention gun reform, finding these recordings or reports is as easy as a Google search. But considering what just happened in Florida this year, with them banning any talk of gay or LGBTQ people in any school in the state, it is atrocious what is happening. So I wish someone in government, if not their governor, would read the transcripts themselves to know what it's really like to be a part of our community, to know how these things happen, and to know that banning education and banning any talk of our community is not the way to solve problems. The Pulse Nightclub is now surrounded by a fence, which features a commemorative screen wrap with local artwork, which serves as a memorial to the victims and survivors. The owner of the club created the One Pulse Foundation, which offers scholarships and a memorial to the victims. An interim Pulse memorial is open daily to allow everyone a place to come and remember the tragic event which happened there. But a permanent memorial is under construction and is expected to open later in 2022. But murals and memorials for the victims of those lost that day were set up across the country. One was set up at an organization called The Center, which is an Orlando LGBTQ advocacy organization. Another was set up outside of a gay bar in Muncie, Indiana, and yet another in Houston, Texas, as well as others. The reason we are noting these memorials to Pulse is because they have all since been defaced and vandalized by homophobic groups. The memorial outside of the center in Orlando is a mural which has the logo for the Pulse nightclub painted in the center of it. In May of 2020, that logo section of their mural was vandalized by white supremacists from the Patriot Front. This is a group classified as the most active white nationalist hate group in the nation. Earlier in the same month of last year, the center's phone lines were cut, pausing them from their LGBTQ counseling services. In August of 2018, the memorial for Pulse Nightclub outside of the gay bar in Muncie, Indiana, was defaced by vandals. And a few months later, in 2018, the mural painted as a memorial for Pulse in Houston, Texas, was defaced with vandals writing the words, quote, "Stop your gay agenda." But even if there was such a thing as a gay agenda, our message would be filled with love and hope, because in the face of hatred, love will always, always win. In the moments that follow, we will be showing you the 49 names of those who were killed during the Pulse nightclub shooting on June 12, 2016. As their names are shown on screen, please pause with us to remember that a majority of these 49 names were murdered in the first 13 minutes of the attack. Our broadcast here tonight began at 2:05 a.m. Eastern Time, which is the exact moment the gunman entered Pulse and began shooting. That means by this moment in our broadcast, a majority of those whose names you'll read in a moment were already on the floor. In 2016, the world paused to take a look at what true hatred looks like. It saw this violence on every news channel, on every screen. Since then, the world has sadly watched time and time again how the victims of this terroristic attack aren't treated as equals, as their memorials are defaced and vandalized by homophobic hate groups and individuals. The truth is, we can only celebrate this Pride Month because others gave their life and shed their blood, so we can have the limited freedoms we're graced with in the United States. But if there's one thing we can take away from such a horrible event, I believe their names should be 49 more reasons why we absolutely must keep fighting onward. 6 years after those 49 innocent people were brutally shot and murdered by an extremely homophobic and transphobic man, the Equality Act sits on the floor of the U.S. Senate, and Republicans and Democrats alike are refusing to vote in favor of basic anti-discrimination and the basic human decency it would offer to LGBTQ people across the nation. Our lawmakers in the House and Senate refuse to pass any meaningful legislation to reform our gun laws, so criminals like this would have a harder time acquiring such weapons of mass devastation. In fact, this year is by far the most anti-LGBTQ legislative year on record. So our lawmakers aren't just ignoring the 80% of non-LGBTQ Americans who support the LGBTQ, and aren't just ignoring the 11.7% of our population who belongs to our community. They aren't just ignoring us, they are purposefully and skillfully targeting our community, hoping that suicide and depression rates rise. And in states like Texas, when they pass these laws and see rates of depression and suicide rising, they are purposefully taking away resources and counseling services so that LGBTQ feel even more alone than before. Our lawmakers refuse to take a vote on conversion therapy bills to ban the practice of pushing children to suicide. Our lawmakers refuse to pass legislation forcing schools to teach positive LGBTQ education. Even here in Pennsylvania, where our show is broadcast from, lawmakers this year tried to ban transgender students from entering sporting programs. But we are ready to stand and fight as Pennsylvania's leader in LGBTQ education, and we are ready to fight globally for the same freedoms and rights of all LGBTQ community members. We are ready to stand and fight against legislators who are homophobic and transphobic. We're ready to stand and fight against governors like Ron DeSantis, who thinks that if we can just get rid of talk about gay people in schools, that suddenly the next generation won't become gay themselves, as if that will ever happen that way. But what legislators and candidates like Ron DeSantis are so afraid of is an educated voter. Because they know if you're educated on what they truly did and what they really tried to do in harming kids, that you won't vote for them again. And that is where we come in. And we're ready to stand and fight to provide the education, because we know that gay and trans people will forever be here. We were here long before Ron DeSantis, and will be here long after. My point is, while we celebrate this Pride Month, it is vital that we take one night to remember all those we lost in our fight to get where we are today. It is vital we remember how far we have come in the past 50 years. But it is just as vital that we also remember our lawmakers like Ron DeSantis and others have just as much blood on their hands as the man who shot and murdered 49 innocent people on June 12, 2016. 80% of non-LGBTQ Americans agree that we need LGBTQ protections in our laws, not banning books or banning talks in school. Yet our elected officials refuse to listen. So while we spend tonight in solace and remember the victims, as we should, tomorrow we must all band together and act, vote, and run for office. Because if we don't, these are the names of the 49 victims that will suffer the most. You know, almost for a second there, I thought that we made it past a point where you and me, we were equals at last. When we made it past the hate, you can love who you love and marry who you date. But But to those who celebrate their love and their pride, and who aren't afraid to fly a rainbow flag outside, know you'll always be dancing out there on that floor. No one can take away the beauty you wore. And though there are monsters hell-bent on being seen, you're the ones I'll remember today from June 12, 16. You know, days like this make you think that our self-destruction must be close to the brink. How could we have come so far? And yet hate shows itself in the middle of this bar. How can we get past the hate when you can love who you love and marry in all 50 states? But to those who celebrate their love and their pride, and who aren't afraid to fly a rainbow flag outside, know you'll always be dancing out there on that floor. No one can take away the beauty you wore. And though there are monsters hell-bent on being seen, you're the ones I'll remember today from June 12, 16. I hope monsters like him don't just make us afraid to show our colors, to show the world our face. I hope heroes like you are what our kids aspire to, and because of you they'll know love is love, no matter who you say it to. But to those who celebrate their love and their pride, and who aren't afraid to fly a rainbow flag outside, know you'll always be dancing out there on that floor. No one can take away the beauty you wore. And though there are monsters hell-bent on being seen, you're the ones I'll remember today. And though there are monsters hell-bent on being seen, you're the ones I'll remember today from June 12, 16.
Okay, first text was at 2:25 a.m. and he states here, it says, "I've been shot at a club. I'm dying. I love you. Dead bodies on top of me. Tell everyone I love them."
He tells his brother to tell mom and dad, "I love them." But the text messages are so horrific, his brother thinks he's kidding until he goes online.
And my heart just literally, it just, like, it was broken. I was just like, my gosh, he was reaching out to me, and I thought it was a joke this whole time.
He wakes up their parents.
He says, no, it can't be, and it's real. And then he just started, crying, and we all did.
All of them crying, unsure if their son would survive. One of his last text messages included this image from inside the bathroom. "Tonight, we have blurred out the faces. Not everyone would survive. but their loved one would find himself in the midst of all of that horror in the bathroom. We also met Malcolm Barraza. Seen in this video, he was one of the survivors who got out of the club and yet still stayed to help the other victims, even as the gunshots continued. You can see him, his hat on backwards, helping to put victims into any vehicle they could find when there were no ambulances in sight. They were putting victims into this pickup truck.
His eyes were like, they were rolling to the back of his head, and he was with, there was about 4 or 5 of us carrying him, and one girl, she just started crying. She said, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. And she put him down and she collapsed and started crying, and I don't know, my natural instinct was to, yell at everybody, give them energy, like, come on, we have to do this, we have to pick him up, let's go, pick him up. And I'm looking at them, screaming at them to get this guy to a truck, because I know that in those instances, seconds matter.
And today, Malcolm told me he is still horrified by how one person can inflict so much harm.
How a person can do that to someone they don't know. They don't know anything about you, and you just walk into a building and you just go, and you change people's lives, so much, and it's unreal. It's unreal.
And then there was the EMT we met, among the first to arrive here, Julio Salgado Jr. He could still hear the gunfire inside the club when he lifted up his first victim outside, a young man asking Julio if he was going to make it.
What did he say?
He just asked me if he was going to be okay, and I tried to reassure him.
How hard is that?
It's very hard. It's just never been on a scene like this before, because they seem so helpless, and it's just like, there's only so much we can do on the road.
The guy was there for a little while before. I didn't realize who he was, because I was running who is this person? Because at the end of the day, when the bullets were being shot, I didn't really see the person. I remember seeing him in there, and I'm like, oh my God, how were you in there having a great time with us, and then turn around and actually start shooting?
Was he actually partying in the bar with people?
He was there. I didn't see him with other people, but when I noticed him, because I remember spotting him, I remember I saw him there just watching the show.
Why did he stand out to you?
I don't know. I just remember seeing him. It was just when I looked at the picture in the morning the next day, I'm like, that guy, I remember seeing him that day. I remember him standing over there at the front, and I feel if you were there, you were enjoying your time, and how are you gonna just turn around and see everyone just having such a great time and end it in such a crazy way?
So, Louis, this is the morning after. Tell me how it is for you the morning after.
It's still shocking. I can still replay everything over in my head. I can still hear everybody yelling, the gunshots repeatedly firing over and over. It's just, it would be different if it was just maybe 1 or 2, but it was just over and over and over, and you can hear it stop for a second or 2 and then start all over again. Just bullets being fired over and over, and I couldn't believe what I was listening to and seeing.
But how do you feel, Louis, in 2016 to hear that you could lose your life if what they're saying, that he just didn't like gay people? You hear that and you think, what?
It's I can't step outside my house. Just me leaving my house is a risk now. The place where I thought it was always comfortable to go to, now I have to double think everywhere else I gotta go to. I'm can I go to the mall and not anything happen there? It just can happen anywhere, and you would never have thought that.
Is it hard to speak out now?
A little, yes. It's very hard to get everything out and trying to figure out what happened and cope with everything and really know what happened.
Thank you for joining us for our 4th annual Vigil for the 49. To get involved in bringing meaningful change, please go to paequality.com or prideclassroom.com. Please join us back here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of Pride Month, and every Friday for the rest of the year for new episodes of our educational show, Powered by Rainbows. As always, I am your host, Professor Pride. Thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.